They say loneliness is an epidemic, and they're right. But they never ask, whose loneliness? Because there's a man sitting alone in a quiet room right now, no notifications, no noise, no performance, and he is not suffering. He is the clearest he has ever been. Meanwhile, outside that room, people are screaming into the void for attention. They'll never be satisfied by, performing versions of themselves that even they don't believe in, calling it connection. What if the man alone in the room isn't the broken one? What if he's the only one who saw through it? There was a moment, maybe you were young, maybe not that long ago, where you looked at what everyone around you was chasing, the validation, the noise, the frantic need to be seen, and something in you just didn't follow. Not because you were depressed, not because something was wrong with you, but because you looked at it clearly, really looked, and it seemed absurd, like watching people fight violently over a coin that isn't real. And the worst part, you couldn't explain it to anyone, because the moment you tried, they looked at you like something was wrong, not at the thing you were pointing at you. So you stopped pointing, and then slowly, you stopped showing up to the places where you'd have to pretend not to see it. That's not unsocial behavior. That's what happens when a person sees something real, inside a world that has agreed collectively, quietly, not to look at it. The question is, what exactly did you see? And why does seeing it make you dangerous to the people still inside it? Here's something that keeps surfacing in psychological literature. And it's strange, uncomfortable even. The people who adapted most completely to certain societies throughout history, the ones who fit in best, caused no friction, followed the rules without question, were not always the most mentally healthy. Sometimes they were the most compliant, and compliance and health are not the same thing. Think about that. We measure psychological well-being in part by social functioning, by how well you slot into the group. But what if the group is functioning badly? What if the group's normal is, to put it plainly, insane? There's a question that's been sitting in philosophy for over a century. Nobody has cleanly answered it. It goes like this. If a society is collectively disordered, is the person who refuses to participate disordered? Or are they the only sane one in the building? We'll come back to that, because the answer is not what you expect, and it has everything to do with why you are the way you are. But first, we need to understand what's actually happening inside the isolated man's mind, because it's not what people think, not even close. Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher, 19th century, wrote something that most people never read. He said, "The crowd is untruth." He wasn't being dramatic. He was pointing at something clinical. When you are inside a group, any group, you stop being fully responsible for your thoughts. The group absorbs the responsibility. No one examines it. It just floats, reproduces, gets louder. The isolated man, the one society calls broken, he never got that release. He had to carry the weight of his own thinking alone. Which means, and this is the part that stings, his thoughts were actually his. Examined, tested, fought over, not borrowed from the nearest crowd. Nietzsche called what drives herd behavior the pathos of distance. Not distance as in isolation, distance as in the gap between those who create meaning and those who borrow it. He wrote in one form or another that to transcend the herd, to build your own values instead of inheriting them, you have to be willing to stand somewhere uncomfortable. Alone, unsanctioned, misread. And then there's Maslow. His hierarchy, you've probably seen it. But what most people skip is what he actually wrote about self-actualized individuals. He wasn't describing extroverts climbing social ladders. He described people with a marked need for privacy, a resistance to enculturation, his word, not mine, an inability to pretend they agreed when they didn't. He wasn't describing dysfunction. He was describing a rare kind of psychological integrity. The man who chooses isolation doesn't lack social skills. In many cases, he sees through social performance so clearly that it's physically difficult to participate in it. That's not a weakness. That's a perceptual ability most people would spend years in therapy trying to develop. I'm not going to pretend this is just all strength and philosophy, because it isn't. The man who sees through the performance, he pays for it. Every single day. The cost isn't obvious. It doesn't show up as screaming or breakdown. It shows up at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if there's something fundamentally wrong with the way he's wired, wondering if everyone else knows something he doesn't. It shows up as watching someone get celebrated, genuinely celebrated, for saying something you know is shallow, and feeling this strange double thing, disgust at the shallowness, and then disgust at yourself for the disgust. Why can't I just enjoy this like everyone else? It shows up as longing, not for noise, but for someone who doesn't require you to become smaller, to be around them. That kind of person is rare. Sometimes you go years without finding one. Jung, and I want to be careful here, because his ideas are often misquoted, wrote about the pain of individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, instead of who the world shaped you to be. He didn't describe it as pleasant. He described it as a kind of death, the death of the false self. The persona, the mask we wear to move through social life, doesn't go quietly. And the isolated man, whether he knows it or not, is often in the middle of that process, refusing the mask, paying the social price of that refusal. The world will tell you you're broken for this, and part of you, let's be honest, believes it. But here's the thing about that belief. You need to look at where it came from. Because it didn't come from you. Consider a tuning fork. You strike it, and it vibrates at a precise frequency. One frequency exact, unwavering. Now put it in a room full of noise. The noise doesn't change what it is. It just gets harder to hear. The man who retreats from society isn't removing himself from reality. He is trying to hear his own frequency again, because the noise got too loud to think inside it. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, surrounded at all times by court politics, war, social performance, wrote privately about what he called the internal citadel, the idea that there is a place inside you that external chaos cannot reach, not if you build it, not if you protect it. He didn't escape Rome, but in his mind, he had somewhere to go that Rome couldn't follow. The isolated man builds something like this, not always consciously. Often it starts as retreat, as exhaustion, as refusal, but over time it becomes something else. It becomes a place of actual clarity. Viktor Frankl, who survived the camps, who watched human beings stripped of everything external, wrote that the last of human freedoms is the freedom to choose one's attitude toward any given set of circumstances. Not a chosen circumstance, just the attitude toward it. The isolated man discovered something close to this, that when you stop needing the crowd to tell you who you are, something becomes available that wasn't there before, something that can't be taken by external opinion, because it was never given by external opinion. Now let me return to that question I left open earlier. Is the person who refuses a disordered society disordered or sane? Krishnamurti's answer was direct. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Read that again, slowly. Your adjustment to this world is not a measure of your health. It is a measure of your compliance. And those are not the same thing. There's a distinction that almost never gets made, and its absence is doing real damage to people like you. Loneliness and solitude are not the same state, not even in the same category. Loneliness is the pain of unwanted aloneness, the absence of something you need and cannot find. That's real, that's suffering, that deserves attention. Solitude is something else entirely. Solitude is presence with yourself, not hiding, not running, not numb. Present. Schopenhauer, a man who by most accounts was not easy to be around, wrote that the degree to which a man is capable of solitude reflects the degree to which he has an inner life, that people who cannot tolerate being alone are revealing something about what's inside, or what isn't. He wasn't being cruel. He was pointing at something observable. People who require constant external stimulation to feel okay are outsourcing their inner life to the environment, which means when the environment goes quiet, they collapse. The man who chooses isolation, at least for stretches, has built something internal to return to, a conversation with himself that is actually worth having, thoughts that belong to him. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. We live in an era that has declared war on inner life, not loudly, quietly, through design, through a phone that fills every silence before you can hear what the silence was trying to tell you, through a culture that monetizes your attention so efficiently that being bored genuinely, unproductively bored, has become almost impossible without effort. The man who withdraws from this is not unsocial. He is refusing to have his inner life replaced by someone else. He is protecting something that the entire commercial architecture of the modern world is trying to extract from him. his attention, his interiority, the quiet place where he is actually himself. Refusing to give that up isn't pathology. In the current landscape, it might be the most radical act available. And here's the paradox. The sane person in an insane system will always appear to be the malfunctioning one, because the system measures sanity by conformity, and the man who sees through the system, by definition, does not conform to it. So of course they call him broken. What else would they call him? He's the only one who isn't playing. There's a type of man, and I want you to sit with this, who spent years believing something was wrong with him. He couldn't sustain the performance that everyone around him seemed to maintain effortlessly. He would show up, watch the ritual, participate just enough, and then go home feeling more alone than when he arrived. Not because of the people, because of the distance between who he was in there and who he actually was. That distance is exhausting in a way that's hard to describe. It's not sadness exactly. It's more like friction, like trying to walk through water. And then, at some point, he stopped. Not as a statement, just quietly stopped. Chose fewer rooms, fewer conversations, fewer performances, and something happened that he didn't expect. He started to think again. Actually think. Not react, not perform, not manage impressions. Think. His opinions became his own. His time became his own. His mind, for the first time in a long time, was a place he could actually live in. That's not a tragedy. That's the whole point. The final thing I want to leave you with, and this is something you won't hear elsewhere, is that choosing solitude is not the same as giving up on humanity. The man who isolates often loves people deeply. That's almost the problem. His standard for connection is too high to be met by small talk. His capacity for depth is too real to be satisfied by surface contact. He isn't misanthropic. He's just unwilling to accept a counterfeit version of what he actually needs. And in a world selling counterfeit connection 24 hours a day, that refusal makes him a very, very rare kind of person. In a world that has largely forgotten what that costs,